Hi, it's Nina with Parish Learning Zone. Thank you so much for joining me today for our free weekly Wednesday webinar. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. I thought what we would do today is I would teach a short reading comprehension mini lesson. And the reason I decided to do this is because as we've been talking to parents and friends during this time when schools are closed and a lot of lessons are taking place online, something that we've discovered is that a lot of students, especially younger students, are struggling to continue to work on their reading and their reading comprehension. A lot of the online instruction is provided through perhaps slides and PowerPoint presentations and things that students are working on independently. So today we wanted to focus on creating a lesson that parents could use at home or that students could watch on their own. And the lesson today is going to be the instructional part of the lesson. And then afterward, I hope that you will find another book on your level or an article to do some guided practice with a parent. And then you can even do this again and continue to practice on your own with different things that you read. So today, again, if you're just joining us, thank you so much for joining us. And what we're going to do today is a short mini lesson that presents a reading comprehension strategy. And this strategy is great for all ages. And of course, you would modify it based on your reading level and the difficulty of the text that you're reading and how familiar you are with reading comprehension strategies. So as we go along, I'm going to suggest some ways that this strategy could be modified. Today, the text that we're going to be looking at is for a younger student, and I thought that that would be better just for everyone because a lot of times when you're learning a new strategy, you don't want to read something that is the hardest possible thing that you can read. You want to learn a new strategy with a text that's very easy for you. So although this lesson would be appropriate for students in third grade all the way on up, anyone who's trying to improve their reading comprehension, a lot of times before third grade, the focus is more on decoding and figuring out the words on the page. And then once students get to upper elementary, the focus switches to finding out the meaning of the words. So as long as you're ready to focus on comprehension, then this lesson would be good for you. And I'm going to suggest some ways to modify the lesson for younger and older students as we go through. Today, the text we're going to focus on is easy, and the reason for that is because you want to use an easy text when you're learning a new strategy. So I'm going to model this strategy for you, and it's based on an effective reading comprehension strategy called annotation that we teach students to use, even college students or high school students at the end of their high school career who are preparing for the SAT. A lot of times we teach them to use annotation. But when I'm working with younger students, jumping right into creating your own notes and annotations can be a little bit overwhelming. So I came up with this strategy because it's more fun, and it's a way to help younger or struggling students or students who have never used annotation before to sort of develop the thinking process that they need in order to be able to later on annotate when they're reading. And it also helps students to focus and be able to engage with the text. so that they can begin to develop those reading comprehension habits that are so important when you're transitioning from the stage where you're just focused on reading the words to the stage where you actually need to understand what the words mean. So we're going to switch over to a story here, and I'm just going to model the strategy for you in this video, and then I hope after the video that you'll try this again with a different article or story on your own or with your parents' assistance. So we're going to switch over here so that you can see the story. And what I've done here is, since this is digital, I went ahead and set up some Post-its, and the Post-its have prompts on them. Or, of course, at home you can use your sticky notes. If you're using a regular paper book, you would use sticky notes. And I like to color code because there's sort of 3 different types of questions or prompts. So you can, if you're using actual sticky notes, you can color code based on the type of question. So we have our before reading questions, and here those questions are blue. And then we have our during reading questions, which I color coded green. And then we have our after reading questions, which are more of a reflection, and I color coded those purple. At first, the teacher or the parent or whoever's working on this with the student would come up with these questions or prompts, and we're going to link this. I'll link this to a blog that I wrote up and another article that I think is really helpful from Edutopia that gives some of these prompts so that you can have some ideas and gives you some ideas of questions that you can use. Of course, later on, with a student that's in middle or high school, if you're teaching this as a teacher to a class, you can brainstorm the questions or prompts together as a class. Or the student can brainstorm. You want to move to the point where the student is thinking of their own questions or prompts, and the teacher can guide that, or the parent can guide that at first by sort of creating a scaffold where you give the student picture clues of categories. So, you might have you might transition to Post-it notes with a question mark on them, and those are for questions, or Post-it notes with a light bulb on them, and those are for ideas, or Post-it notes with a little chain link on them, and those are for connections that you make between the text and something else that you've seen or heard or read. And that way, at first you're providing the student or your child with these questions and prompts, and then you're kind of moving over to categories where they're providing it on their own, and then eventually you want them to be able to completely do it on their own, like when they're in high school and reading harder text, or once they've practiced this strategy quite a few times, they would be completely producing their own annotations, because that is where we eventually want to be. But I believe that you should start with reading strategies when students are really young, and then work up to that point that you want them to be by the time they take the SAT, for example. So you'll see here in blue that we have some prompts, some questions before reading. And what you're going to do before you read a text is you're going to go through and preview it. We're going to look at the pictures. We're going to look at the captions. We are going to perhaps read the first and last paragraph and look at any important words. And while we do that, we're going to make some predictions and think about what we already know on this topic. And these questions are going to help us do that. So since we're going to do an example here, we'll go ahead and do that with this book. We see that it's called Dogs at Work. And so we can think about what we already might know about this topic. But let's go ahead and go through a little bit and sort of preview the book by looking at some of the other pictures. We can see that the focus question down here is, how can dogs help people? And there's some important words to know on this page, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute, but we can preview those there. We see we have chemicals, comfort, criminals, detection, disabilities, and medicine. And we want to think about how could those words all be connected together and connected to this larger topic. we're looking and seeing different types of working dogs. This looks like a dog maybe that is working with somebody in the military. We see sled dogs and hunting dogs and herding dogs. And we're going to read the headings here: service and therapy dogs. And we see maybe a therapy dog in this picture. And it says below the picture, petting a dog can make sick people feel better. And then on the next page, we see a guide dog helping its owner get off a train. And we see a service dog putting its paw on its owner to tell its owner that it's time to take a certain medication. And above that, we see a picture that some people, that explains some people have dogs that help them with their medical needs. And then we see a picture here of search and rescue dogs. And it says that search and rescue dogs help police find a lost boy. And we see that our heading is search and rescue dogs. And then we see a firefighter here in this picture, and the firefighter uses a rescue dog to search for people under rocks in China. And then we see a dog helping with a water rescue. And then we see a category about detection dogs. And it looks like a detection dog is a dog that helps police look for someone who's committed a crime. And then we also see another detection dog looking through a burned building, looking for different chemicals. And we see detection dogs sniffing for termites in this picture. And then that looks like the end. And they have different pictures of different types of dogs doing different jobs. So we're going to go back to the beginning. And now that we've previewed this a little bit, we can think through what this book might be about and make some predictions. And so if you were reading on your own, you would want to go through this same process. It helps to preview a text to see sort of what you're going to be reading about, and also so that you can think about whether you already know something about this topic. So we have a question here that says, I already know these things about this topic. So right now, think if you're sitting and watching this video with your parents or at home by yourself, you can work along with me if you'd like, and go ahead, and if you have a piece of paper, you can just say it out loud, or you can tell your parent, is there anything you already know about dogs that work? Different jobs that dogs might do. And I'm going to type some jobs here. I already know that dogs help police, and that might be a job that they do. I know that dogs help people with medical needs, because a lot of us have been out, in a public place, and sometimes people will have a dog that helps them if they have a special medical need. And let's think if I know anything else about dogs that help people. I know that sometimes dogs pull sleds. I've seen dogs working, and they're sled dogs. Maybe you've read a book about that, or maybe you've heard about that too. Okay, so my next question says, I think that this book will be about. Well, from looking at all of the pictures, what do you think? Go ahead and make a prediction. What do you think this book will be about? I'm gonna say, I think this book will be about working dogs, different jobs that dogs have. Okay, so I have my note there, and then I'm going to list some questions that I have before reading, because sometimes it helps to stay focused if we have some questions that we're focusing on. And if you don't really have any ideas for questions, you can always look at the headings and turn those into questions. So let's say I'm just completely out of thoughts and ideas. So I can go and look at the headings and I can make them a question. So I could take service and therapy dogs, and I could go back and I could put a question word in front of it and make it into a question. And so my question might say, what do service and therapy dogs do? And then I could go to the next section and I could make another question. And we can do this for every section or just the ones that we don't really feel like we know much about. So I kind of know what search and rescue dogs do, so I'm going to skip that section. But I don't know much about detection dogs, so let me ask a question about that. I'm going to say, how do detection dogs help police officers? Because that's what I want to know. So I'm going to write that question down. Okay, there we go. We got our question mark. And let's go to the next page. We have a couple more questions before reading here. We have some important words here, and sometimes though these words will be bold in the text. So we have chemicals, comfort, criminals, detection, disabilities, and medicine. So I think that we have these words because they're all related to different jobs that dogs do. Dogs help find criminals, they help comfort people, they might help to sniff out chemicals or detect and find certain things, they help people with disabilities, and they help people learn to take their medicine. And I know that because we looked at the pictures, and the pictures sort of told us that story even before we read the book so that we could get ready to read. So I'm going to put that here. I know that all of these words we'll say, are related to different jobs that dogs do. Okay, and so I skimmed the headings and pictures, and I think I'll be reading about, well, what do you think we'll be reading about? I think at this point, this question is pretty easy for us. We know that we're going to be reading about jobs that dogs do. Okay, so now we're ready to read. We've sort of prepared our brain, and we're all ready. We're on the same page as the author was, and we're ready to get going. And we have our table of contents here that shows us the headings that we looked through already, and we're going to start reading. And you'll notice as we start reading that our questions have turned green because these are our during reading questions, and we're going to answer these as we go through as a way to stay focused and make sure that we're understanding what we're reading. And you'll notice that the questions before we read had to do with previewing and making predictions, and the questions while we read have to do with our reading comprehension skills and strategies, like making an inference, drawing a conclusion, summarizing, and all those important things that we've learned about at school that make us better readers, like making connections and thinking about the important details while we read and picking some of those out. So we're going to be practicing those things as a way to stay engaged with what we're reading and stay focused. So we have introduction here. You probably know that some dogs aren't just pets, they hold jobs. Dogs learn fast. They also hear and smell better than we do. This means dogs can do jobs that people can't. Okay, so here's what I read in my own words. This is asking me to put it in my own words, so it's asking me to summarize. So, I'm going to say that this section is about, and you can do this on your paper too along with me, okay? So go ahead and say what you heard in your own words. And this is one type of note that we can make while we're reading. If we read something and want to make sure we understood it, we can summarize it in our own words. But it should be shorter than what you read. You don't want to recopy everything that you read. That would be a ton of work. We're not trying to rewrite the story here. So we're going to say some dogs are more than pets because they have important jobs. All right. And if you need more, let's see, we'll give that a little more space so we can see the whole thing. There we go. Okay. Service and therapy dogs. Many dogs work with people to help them feel better. These dogs are called therapy dogs. Therapy dogs are trained to comfort people and keep them calm. Okay, so our question here, our prompt is, I've learned something like this before, or this reminds me of. Okay, so this, I'm going to write down something that this reminds me of. You may have something different that you think of or that you write down, and you can share that now too. What does this make you think of? Have you ever seen somebody that has a therapy dog before when you were out in public, or maybe you have a friend that has a therapy dog? So what this makes me think of is I have seen people who have diabetes and use therapy dogs to help monitor their blood sugar. So they have a therapy dog. I have a friend who has somebody I worked with who had a therapy dog, and the dog helped them to know when they were having an issue with their blood sugar. The dog would help them monitor that. So that's what it makes me think of. Other dogs help people with disabilities. These dogs are called service dogs. Some of these dogs help people who can't see or hear well. Other dogs pick up dropped items and pull wheelchairs. Tennille the guide dog. A service dog named Tennille helped her owner hike. Tennille was the first service dog trained to do this. Her owner, Trevor Thomas, is blind. Tennille helped Thomas step over large rocks. Thomas hopes that he and Tennille can encourage other blind people to hike too. Some service dogs can smell when their owner is about to be sick. They warn their owner to take medicine. Okay, so that's sort of like what I was thinking with the dog that helps with the person that I know that has diabetes. Some people get sick because they don't have enough sugar in their blood. This dog carries sweet drinks for its owner in case she needs them. Okay, so this Post-it says, I want to know more about, or I have a question about. Well, this sort of makes me wonder, and you can write down your own question too. How does the dog know when their owner is, something is not right with their owner's inside their body, like their blood sugar, or when their owner is having an issue? How does the dog know? Because that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Search and rescue dogs. Some dogs look for people who are lost. They are called search and rescue dogs. Many search and rescue dogs use their nose to find people who need help. Some of these dogs sniff the ground to find people. Other dogs sniff the air. These dogs can find lost hikers. They can also find people trapped in buildings that have fallen down. Some search and rescue dogs work in the water. Water rescue dogs can pull people to safety. They need to be strong swimmers. For this reason, big, strong dogs like the Newfoundland make good water rescue dogs. A 68-kilogram, 150-pound Newfoundland can pull 10 people to safety at once. So our question here is, this made me think of or gave me the following idea. So this made me think of that this dog is a pretty good lifeguard. It can pull 10 people to safety at once. I've never actually seen this happen, but that's what I thought of when I was reading. I thought, wow, I've never seen a dog being a rescue dog like that, but it's pretty amazing that the dog can pull 10 people to safety. That's way better than usually what a human lifeguard can even do, or somebody performing a rescue. So it must be really helpful. Okay. Odd jobs. Dogs are good learners and they can do very odd jobs. For example, one dog worked at an airport in Michigan. He chased wild birds out of the path of planes. Another group of dogs had an odd job at a baseball park near the ocean in California. These dogs jumped into the ocean to get balls that were hit into the water. The program is now over, but for a time, baseball fans love to collect these splash hit balls. So our prompt here says, I'm interested in learning more about. And it doesn't have to be from this page, but simply anything that you've read about that you're interested on this topic of learning more about. So I'm going to put, you can write down something that you're interested in learning more about that has to do with working dogs. I am interested So I think it's interesting that dogs are able to pick up on the fact that somebody with a medical need is not doing well, and that's something that I'd be interested in learning something more about. So maybe I have more questions about that I can look up, and maybe all my questions won't be answered here, but I can certainly find the answers to my questions later on by looking somewhere else. Detection dogs. Some dogs use their nose to find things that are hidden. They are called detection dogs. Police use detection dogs to find criminals. Police also use these dogs after a building burns down. It may be hard to find out whether somebody set the fire on purpose. The dogs sniff for chemicals that might have been used to start the fire. Detection dogs don't just work in the world of crime. Some of these dogs search for termites in houses and other buildings. Termites ruin buildings by eating wood. They are hard for humans to find, but dogs can sniff them out. Okay, so something new or unexpected that I learned is that dogs can sniff for termites. Didn't know that. So I'm going to make a complete sentence here. I learned that dogs can sniff for termites. Never seen that before. Okay. Conclusion. Okay, so we know this is the end. So we see our questions here have changed to purple because this is what we're going to reflect on after we have read. We're going to be focusing on what we learned and putting things together and trying to think about the author's purpose and the main idea. So let's read our conclusion and then we'll look at some of those questions and maybe look back to answer some of the questions we had in the beginning. From finding termites to pulling wheelchairs, dogs help us in many ways. Dogs are strong, smart, and friendly, and they have powerful senses. They are some of the best workers around. So, okay, our first question, the main idea of this book is, so we're trying to think about what is the main reason, what's the main point of this book? So if you can think about that, you think about that and go ahead and tell your parent or say it out loud, or you can write it down. And I'm going to type mine here. Okay, so I have the main idea is that dogs can have many jobs that help people. The next post-it question or prompt is that I did not get the answer to this question and I would like to look it up. Well, we know that my question that I had that I didn't get the answer to is how exactly do dogs know? For example, if somebody's blood sugar is not right, or if somebody who has a mental health issue or another health issue, how do they know that something is going wrong with them? So I would be interested in looking that up. So I'm going to put that here. You can also write down a question that you're still wondering about on your paper, or you can take some time in just a minute and look it up. And the last thing is we have a place here to write some answers to the questions that we had before reading. So let's go back and look at those up on the first page. We had asked, what do service and therapy dogs do? And how do detection dogs help police officers? So, okay, let's look at the first one. We know that service and therapy dogs work with people to help them feel better. They comfort people, and they help people with disabilities. So we're going to go put that down because we definitely found the answer to that. So we'll say service and it's hard to type in and talk at the same time. Okay, so we have service and therapy dogs help and comfort people. They also may help people with disabilities. Okay, now we're going to look back. Do you remember the answer to our second question about what detection dogs do? What do detection dogs do? So we know if we look back that detection dogs help the police to find hidden things. They might help to find chemicals. They might help to find people who have committed a crime, criminals. They might help to find things like termites. So we're going to just sum that up since we have a limited amount of space and say detection dogs help to find hidden things. All right, so we're all finished now with this book, but by doing these Post-it note annotations, we have all sorts of connections that we've made, and it's caused us to really think about what we're reading. And so if we had questions after the book, we would probably have a really easy time answering those questions. In addition, if we were going to need to write something about this book, to write a written response for an older student, that becomes a lot easier when you've done all of the work of processing what you read while you read it. So I hope that you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope that you'll try another book with your own sticky notes at home, or a digital book like we've done here from Reading A to Z. If you have access to that from your school, I hope you'll try it that way, but you can use your own books at home and your own sticky notes, and I hope that you'll try this strategy with your parents at home. And I hope that you'll also join us next week for our Wednesday webinar at 1:30. And I thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in finding out more fun ways to practice reading, we have some fun programs, online interactive programs coming up. We have a book club for upper elementary students where they'll read a book with a group of friends, and then they'll discuss the book with a teacher, and in a very casual way and a fun way learn some strategies while they're reading to help them process and understand what they're reading, and to keep their reading up to date and keep them fresh on all their reading strategies until they're able to go back to school. We also have a couple of writing programs coming up for older students in middle and high school and college to help with practical writing, to prepare for the upcoming writing test that some students need to take in middle school in 8th grade, and to help high school and college students to prepare for writing at that level. So I hope that you will check those out. Some start as early as next week, and we have them ongoing throughout the summer. So I hope I'll post the link here if you want to check some of that out for some more reading and writing instruction from licensed teachers similar to this video. But of course, a wide variety of different reading and writing strategies. I'll post the link here below this video so you can check it out. Thank you again so much for joining me, and I hope that you will join me again next week at 1:30, where we'll discuss another education topic for our weekly Wednesday webinar. Have a great week.